President Bola Tinubu has sworn in ministers to his cabinet, coming nearly 3 months after his inauguration. The inauguration is coming shortly after the Senate screening and confirmation of 45 ministers designate out of the 48 candidates sent to the National Assembly by President Bola Tinubu. Now, Tinubu has appointed former investment banker Olawale Edun as financial minister and coordinating minister for the economy, while also naming Heineken Lokpobori as junior minister of petroleum and Ekperikpe Ekpo as the junior minister of gas resources. The minister of petroleum is yet to be appointed. Now let's turn to Arise analyst Dr. Sam Amadi to discuss the task ahead of the ministers who were inaugurated today and the expectations from them. He'll also be looking at Tinubu's decision to restore the Niger Delta ministry and the size of the cabinet against the backdrop of a clamor for a lean government. Good afternoon and welcome to Newsday. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Sam.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
All right, so we watched the swearing-in ceremony this afternoon. Wanted to ask you what your opinions of the swearing ceremony were, and also what we could reasonably expect from the members of this new ministerial cabinet.
Well, I think the extent I watched, it was a well-scripted event and well compared and managed. So essentially a normal formality and solemnity. Now one could argue that the government has commenced in full, in full force, and all the pieces are in, with special advisors in, and the ministers in, and the legislature in. Of course, the courts, the judiciary has always been there. And so this is now full. The plane has taken off and now has gained altitude and stabilized. So it's now cruising time. But again, everything depends on the dialectics of the core objective of the president. You know, the thing about presidential system of government is that it rests on the shoulder of the president. The executive branch of the government is the president's branch. And so the president might put together a wonderful team of technocrats or a wonderful team of technopolis, politicians who have technocratic capability, and they're all seated. Then they wait for the brief. Okay, the brief is general. The president has made statements about what he intends to achieve. Some of them are in his manifesto. Some of them are in his policy statements he's made over the years. For example, over the days, he talked about the CNG and they need to create jobs. They need to move away from subsidy has ended and now to get an economy that doesn't run on subsidy. Other issues as infrastructure, I talked about all those things. But you would now want to see if there are specifications, policy roadmaps, documents that you'll be giving to these ministers that explain how each ministry contributes to the overarching strategy, objective and implementation roadmap of the government. And that's where the real work starts. So if there are those documents, they will expect that the ministers with 1 or 2 aides will walk down and look at it in terms of what their ministry has to do. And not forgetting the structure of public service. Many of these are going to come from states where there are chief executives, governors, about 6 or so of them, where they have just given orders and the guys in the second floor, drive it. But now they're going to be receiving order from Villa. They have the president's mandate. They now have to deal with the PAMSEC, who is the chief accounting officer. They have to now begin to understand the structure of the public service in terms of procurement policy. Restaurants, many of them could award billions for projects that didn't have proper bankability, but now they have to go through a very strict public procurement procedure before you even get to FEC. The approval level, some of them is far less than that of a chief executive of Parastata. So these new changes, they now have to start learning day one, so they who don't have that experience, and then begin to think in terms of 3 things. One is, how do you now drill down those major policy bullets that you hopefully they receive from the president, and then drill them down to interventions in the ministry. 2, how do you manage the human resources, the directors, the staffing across board, to create synergy, focus, and mission-critical focus, as well as harmony? And thirdly, how do you engage with the changing landscape of politics and policy? Because primarily, you are also, in some sense, managing the political fallout of economic and developmental policies that government will initiate. So multitasking here, and the hope is that these guys have the orientation to learn, because leading and learning go together. And of course, they have residue of competence to tie into resources that are available and create new ones to succeed in the mission.
Now, Dr. Amadi, at a time when Nigerians are calling for a reduction in the cost of governance, the president decided to expand his own cabinet. I'm wondering if this expansion was really necessary. What are your thoughts on that? Or are Nigerians probably missing a bigger picture? Maybe the president is saying something that Nigerians are not seeing. What do you think?
I think I have a more nuanced view about cost of governance. Oftentimes, we look at numerics. We count number of ministries, number of parastatals, MDS, and that's one part of it. If you look at the Orasa report, Orasa dwelt on what they call, structure, deduplication. Some agencies are too many, but beyond that, it's what called cost centers. If you look at how these agencies function, for example, all the ministers could have one SUV or two SUVs or three with a pickup backing them up. And they could also have just one SUV. So if you have 48 ministries and they have three SUVs for each minister, then that's going to be, or 48 ministers, it's going to be 48 as 3. But as soon as you have 50 ministries and they all have one SUV, so actually you have gained in terms of cost. So I want us to look at the cost component in a broader sense. The president can actually have more ministries if it's strategically defined to do, intervention specified. So take, for example, the Ministry of Blue Ocean Economies could be a new thing that shouldn't take too much bureaucratic cost in terms of institutions, buildings, offices in Lagos, maybe penthouse here and there. It could be just the minister and 20 smart guys, experts, and a few, 1 or 2, 3, 4 drivers or something like that. So that's a ministry. I think there's a need to reconceptualize, really, what is driving up cost of governance. And I think is the privilege, the treatment of public office as a prerogative, as if we are appointed or elected kingship. So you're a minister today in Transcorp, where we're sitting right now. A minister is doing a big bash, whether done for him or himself. So people are all coming there, big event, you appointed a minister. And across the country, I can imagine across Abuja, there's so many parties going on and so many expectations that ministers are going to come and carry 12, 20 aides and put into the place and expand, fly first class. They're going to event, it goes with 10 people, and attend all conferences, relevant or not relevant. These are the cost centers that needs to be, overcome. Not necessarily 7 ministries, 14 ministries. So I think that, to be fair, if I was a president, and for example, you could say human capital development or gender equality could be a focus area you want to drive up, performance effectively. And it could be a ministry of 10 people, really. So I would like to look at how is this government reducing costs? What are they doing new? For example, are they reducing the cost, the payments, the expenses? Under Obasanjo, there was a circular that says nobody should fly first class. But when I was in government, everybody I knew flew first class who had the level of chief executive or minister or PAMSEC or director, apart from NEC, where we first made it a policy. Because why should you fly first class? First class is for royalties. You have to fly economy or economy plus. And if you're going extended visit time, maybe 7-11 flight, 7 hours flight or thereabout, 11 flight, you take a business class. The difference between business class and first class in many routes, long journey, could be up to 2 million, 3 million. So the point here is, let's define what we're looking at. We want to have nimble, smart government. We want to have ministers and government officials just like other citizens executing a task. The way a prudent enterprise runs itself, which is, look, we reduce costs unnecessary, and people are doing their functionality. We don't want to have events in villa, for example, under Buhari, the cost of the villa is so expensive, the budget is big, both for entertainment, everything. The budget of the clinic is big, nobody goes there, oftentimes they're abroad. These are the areas I want to see focus. So I would pardon the president or any president who adds 3-4 new ministries, but I want to see definition. What is it that this ministry is supposed to do different? So that's making a case for a new ministry. And then how do you staff that ministry? So in my view, some of these new ministries don't need any, you have the civil service to pick brain from, and I have 2 or 3, 4 experts who shape policy for the new minister. So 47 ministers, bigger than we used to have, but not really where the cost is. The cost is, would this government do something different? Are we going to have National Assembly people still take home that massive fund they take home, which is not required in any way for effective parliamentary work? We have to reduce them back to lawmaking and oversight. And oversight rests upon a bureaucracy of National Assembly and not National Assembly officers traveling all over the world. So that's really how we cut down on cost of governance. Yes, we need to remove duplication of functions. We don't have to have, for example, I wouldn't think you need a Ministry of Culture. You don't need tourism, sorry. You don't need that because we're not going to, our company advantage is not tourism. And if we do, the tourism board exists. The tourism agencies to drive that exist. So there's no point having a Ministry of Tourism, in my view, because look, we have to solve so many socioeconomic problems to even be competitive in West Africa, in Africa, because of globally. So why bother yourself about that? I'll probably scale back on Ministry of Sports. Basically, no reason. I mean, we can go back to Youth Fund, the days where agencies like Youth Fund and Nigeria Sports Commission, like all over the world, in many developed countries, drive up sports as a private sector. Government focuses now on youth development, university games, which you don't need to use a ministry to drive. You can use university commission, incentivize them, build capacity. They promote as in the past, Nuga games, Youth Fund games. And then that group, I like the Ministry of Youth because essentially, not just youth is not about sports, youth is also about human capital development, youth is also about entrepreneurship. So it depends on how you design the ministries and they flow from your vision of government, ideation. Where are we going to? What does the government want to do different? How does the government want to take this country to a new direction? And therefore, what are the various alignment that needs to happen? And that's how you structure. So you don't start with ministries and then what shall we be doing? You start from what do we want to do? And so how do we want to structure ourselves so we can effectively execute what we want to do?
All right, fair enough, Dr. Amadi. I want to talk about the reshuffling of a few of the cabinet positions within the last couple of days. Rumor has it, and I said rumor, that a former governor of a state who was recently appointed as a minister was displeased by his previous portfolio, saying that the ministry had been stripped of its key agencies and therefore wanted another portfolio. And that's how some of this shuffle came into play. My question is, with the portfolios kind of mix and match, what could we reasonably expect from the portfolio holders, especially as history has seen that they don't always perform up to standards and they're not always equally yoked with the portfolios that they're given?
Well, that's really the adverse part of our political economy. First, you don't appoint people minister. In Nigeria, we have this sense that there's something called a minister. You're a minister for a particular specific position. So first you appointed a minister. They will start looking for where to put you. So if you appointed a minister of X, let's say transport, and the person felt, look, this place doesn't have enough to do because you have yanked off aviation, you have taken off many of the maybe juicy, whatever they call it, positions. And then he will opt out and you take him out of because you appointed him based on a definition of his profile and the sector you think he can deliver. So if he's no longer going for any reason, whether it's not confirmed or whether he doesn't like the position again, you take him out. You don't shuffle it back. So we shuffle because we focus on a minister, appointed a minister. That's why later to the Senate President says the foreign persons are appointed as minister and nominees for ministerial position. if you appoint people for a particular position, then when they are no longer fit for it or they are not ready to take it on, they leave the cabinet. You don't now look for shake-up to see, okay, where can they be? No, because they are identified with a particular position. And back to the question then, it means that the president is, whoever nominated this for him or whoever helped him nominate, would have considered that person and the position they gave him as fit. Now that under pressure, you're going to give him a new position, then the question is he fit for those positions? So that's what you see, and that's the truth about it. Many of the ministers are going to be, managing sectors, probably they are engaging for the first time in their life. You don't have to be a PhD in a particular area to do well. I mean, there are general managerial competencies you should possess and general intelligence to learn. But it's always the case that either somebody's appointed a place he has expressed strong views about, he's appointed a place he has worked and gained experience, or a place where he has strong ideas of what to do. And that's how you get optimal performance. So we're likely not going to get optimal performance from these guys because they're now being rolled into places that look more prestigious. So let's take, for example, the new so-called blue ocean economy, and because we know that $1 trillion have been named as buried under the ocean, it's going to be a lot of money. And so maybe, or you are in sports, and sports looks like a dry area, and a Niger Delta is coming up, you move to that place, and then you get a bigger show. The problem is that you might not have the skill set fit for it. But look, the key thing, all this can be mitigated. If the president, any president has very quality advisory staff, the key thing about presidential governance is that it happens from the villa. If it's the US, it's the White House that governs. The chief of staff and the staffers have responsibility to craft policies, to even bypass non-performing ministers. I mean, under Section 5 of the Constitution, the president can actually take out a function that belongs to the ministry, except defined by law, and hand it over to another person to run. I mean, we knew under previous government, Obasanjo, at the time, El-Rufai was made chairman of interim committee on electricity with all basic and orders, and members of that committee. That's not his portfolio, it was FCT minister. So Section 5 says the president can do any of this job by himself, by his vice president, by a minister, or any other public official. So the president can ask, well, if any of these guys are failing because they got there by politics, they got there some patronage, or because the president is overwhelmed, or some presidential staffers did their job and got things mixed up one way or the other, the president can still mitigate their harm by, circumnavigating them and getting directors, permanent secretaries to take up the heavy work that needs to be done. But unfortunately, that is a form of inefficiency that we can avoid right now by putting the persons that the president considers fit for those positions in those positions. So again, the last minute, this is the first time in history that we're going to change the cabinet before it was inaugurated. I mean, this never happened before. You got them confirmed, they've not even been inaugurated, and you're making changes. So it speaks to one thing. It speaks to either tardiness, in that you didn't probably, look at their team properly and make a decision that is really shows rigor. Or it's like this is a reversible phenomenon. So if there are political push, then something changes. We saw the Niger Delta ministry, some of us thought it was tactical or strategic. I would say it makes sense at this point, perhaps, to remove the ministry and focus, build the strength of NDDC and maybe presidential initiative that the president will ensure that all these things get done. But now we've seen Niger Delta come back. Is it because there was oversight, somebody didn't understand it, or because Niger Deltans now have spoken up and not happy, and then the president has to change his mind? Yes, maybe responsive, but at the same time, it shows probably that the level of detailing, the level of rigor, and the level of deliberation and consideration you expect at the beginning of a presidency before you get faced by the political storms coming that are going to come. At this point, you want to see accuracy, coherence, and decisiveness.
Well, Dr. Amadi, there are some very sensitive ministries that will, to a very large extent, determine the success or otherwise of this administration. For instance, the finance minister, he's expected to stabilize the naira, grow the country's foreign reserves, manage our debt profile, and so many others. How easy or how challenging do you think this task will be? Are you optimistic that he can deliver?
I think he's a person that has the president's ear and looks like somebody who is fit for that job because he has known him, President has kind of endorsed his views, his monetary views. He was formerly special advisor on monetary policy. So I guess he should know enough about financial economics, how these things work. But look, what we also know is that you have to, like the former Nobel, Rona Maida says, you can't study economics in isolation. You have to study economics together with institutions, sociology, politics, and all the intersections among them. So I think his job is going to be a difficult one because, look, what happens to our currency? What happens to our, economic development? Even simple things as our forex is not just a function of what's happening to the financial market. It's what happened to the whole sector, what happened generally in import, in mobilization, and he's the coordinating minister of the economy. So which means his brief goes beyond the financial sector where he has strong competence. So I think he has to first begin to look at the idea of creating a policy group around him of diverse skill sets. He's going to have those who come from the banking sector, for the KPMGs and the Andersons and all that, all those people of old. He's going to have also the sociologists, those who study society, the political scientists, political economists, and bring them together. Because what we have seen is that the notion of a Council of Economic Advisors that can deliver must be a mixed one that looks at, do all the predictions, not based on a linear prediction, based on financial bottom line, do a financial analysis and say, look, this is what government is going to gain and lose. But then, end of the day, you forget that the losses and gains that come from social losses will crowd out and undermine financial gains. So I think he needs to. That's a great job. And this government, based on what they inherited, of course, and what they have also created for themselves with the removal of subsidy, the manner in which it was done, the looming war in Niger, and other issues, they're going to have heavy economic headwinds to face. So I think that department, that ministry has to be staffed properly. The minister is somebody who has the experience, mature enough, and probably knows where to locate skills. But beyond that, I think the ideology of economic policy making should be robust and should not be a surrender to private sector, and especially the financial market, financial players who look at, who have over-financialized the economy. The economy is not finance. The earlier, the people in the third world recover the sense of economic development, of political economy, of looking at how do we ensure productive economy is running, how do we ensure that idle assets are productive, and how do we create enough incentive for alignment of behavior, even social change, national orientation. He has to tap into all this, because if we don't change orientation, and if we are not mobilizing idle capital, and if we are not producing and expanding the productive frontier, we can't even solve the simple problem of defending the Naira, because essentially, many will argue that what the Naira is suffering is low productivity. You don't have enough to back it up, and if you float it, you have a problem. If you don't float it, then you have an imaginary and overvalued Naira that probably makes even a small import very difficult. So it's difficult. It's a great job to do. It's difficult. It's good that somebody that brings trust, who probably has his ears, is heading that ministry, but he now needs to do an audit of skill set available to him and improve that skill set, because those who are in the table, who is on the table of policy making, ultimately affects the quality of policy. And if the policy is very presumptive, then you're going to see a blowback, and then you see a policy failure.
Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for this conversation.